So welcome to Raw and Real with
Leo, of course, the usual.
And Aura. But this time we're actually going to have a very, very special guest, and his name is KEVIN Kiley. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you?
We're doing very well. We're so excited to have you on Raw and Real. And before we start the quizzing here, I'm just going to make a short introduction, a little bit about your background. So KEVIN Kiley, it's an American politician serving California State Assembly, representing the 6th District. He assumed for the very first time office on December 5th, 2016. He was re-elected in 2018, and he was re-elected again in 2020. So congratulations, Kevin. That's amazing.
Very well done. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Kevin actually received a bachelor from Harvard University. He got a master in secondary education from Loyola Marymount, and he went back to school to receive his degree in law from Yale University. Prior to being elected to the state assembly, he was a lawyer and then a state deputy attorney general. By just checking out Kevin's agenda, we've noticed that there are a couple of issues that we're going to discuss tonight. So
we're going to solve tonight, or we're going to solve issues tonight.
So on Kevin's agenda, there are a couple of issues. One, it's helping the homeless population, making California affordable again. And then it's improving our schools, and that's going to be part of our second section of the podcast, and the reforming our political system. And that's pretty much how we are going to start, because Kevin, we know that on June this year, with the Assemblyman James Gallagher, you guys filed a lawsuit against Governor Newsom for his unconstitutional executive orders issued amid the coronavirus pandemic. Why did you do that?
Well, we did that for a simple reason. That's to defend our form of government here in California. We have had this one-man rule, this autocracy, for going on 8 months now. And it has been devastating for our state. And it's not the way things are supposed to work. We're supposed to have 3 branches of government. We're supposed to have a representative process. We're supposed to allow the people of California to participate in political decision-making. And none of that has happened this year. Instead, Gavin Newsom has simply grabbed all of the powers of the state for himself and has been ruling California by decree. So we took him to court to vindicate our Constitution, our system of government, and we're very happy last week when the judge ruled in our favor and ruled the governor has violated the Constitution and is going to put in a permanent injunction to stop him from doing it again.
That's super awesome. Thank you for, we all feel like as a small business owners that we have a voice through you right now. You give us hope, literally.
Well, I'm trying, and I understand.
I mean, yeah. Well, one question, you said they have 3 branches. When he goes on and make those decisions, what happened to the other branches? What are the rest of the people are doing?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the legislature has been pretty, derelict this year. The leaders of the California legislature have actually been okay with letting the governor just, take over and do their jobs as well as his own and claim their power as well as that's rightfully due the executive branch. So it's sort of a 2-step. I mean, the governor has violated the Constitution, has taken a sledgehammer to representative government, and the legislature, by and large, has just let it happen. So the people of California have just been enormously ill-served by their government this year.
Wow. Kevin, I mean, how many executive orders are we talking about when we are really looking at one-man rule here? How many of them,
Well, he's issued 58 executive orders by this point that have changed over 400 laws unilaterally, without the involvement of any other branch of government, without the involvement of the public, without any public process. He just issues a decree and suddenly it's a law, it's a binding order. And that is all, of course, in conjunction with his orders closing businesses, with this whole unscientific, arbitrary lockdown scheme with the colors and everything, with his monstrous school closure order, which is keeping kids out of school for no reason, has been absolutely devastating for millions of California families, and a number of his other mandates as well. So the governor has, single-handedly remade life in California, has changed laws in something like 17 or 18 different California codes, whether it's the education code or the elections code or the businesses and professions code or the corporations code or the harbors and navigations code. He's, fully assumed the role of the legislature. So I think that now that we have a decision from the third branch of government, the courts, that are putting a stop to that, I mean, it's time the legislature started doing its job and actually, provide some constructive policy and try to bring some sanity back to the way our state's handling this whole situation.
Right. So what happened, like when all of this happened, right? It's been happening for 8 months. Nobody came up and say, hey, wait, what are you doing? We got to talk to us too. Like we are all involved in this. No, nobody came up.
Not really. I mean, there's been a couple members on the other side of the aisle who have complained a bit, but no one's been willing to do anything about it. At least in the majority, it's fallen upon me and James Gallagher, two members of the super minority, to actually defend the legislature's constitutional prerogatives and the right of the people of California to have a representative government.
But Kevin, isn't this interesting? I mean, like right now, so it was on November 2nd, right? When Sarah Heckman actually realized that, yes, I mean, unfortunately, Newsom has been a one-man rule tyrant, we would say. So right now that actually she voted, she found him guilty. What's the next step? What's going to happen? I mean, this happened at the Superior Court, right?
Right. Well, the governor says he's going to appeal as soon as possible. And that's fine. That's his right in our system. Right. He can appeal. We're very confident the decision will stand. He also wants to try to get it put on pause while he appeals, which we are not in favor of, and the judge has not agreed to that yet. So as long as the ruling is in effect, and we believe it will stand, the governor is forbidden from taking on powers that are not his in our constitutional system and ruling by decree and making new laws and new policies. With the stroke of a pen by fiat. He's forbidden from doing that. And if he tries to do it again, well, the order is in effect, then he'll be in contempt of court and we'll have to go and get him restrained.
Taken care of. So this is starting with whatever he decreed until now, correct? So from this moment on, he cannot actually come up with his own regulations. But how about based on the ones that he already did?
One in place already, yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that a number of them are legally suspect, and we are reviewing right now exactly which ones those are, and we plan to make it known actually pretty shortly. Which we believe the governor needs to withdraw. And I'll also add that the lockdown itself, the blueprint, the so-called blueprint,
for the color-coded one, yeah,
right, the color-coded thing, that is now being challenged in a separate lawsuit that is using our same legal theory. So the same argument that we made in our case to get this very important precedent is now being used to challenge the lockdown itself. That the lockdown itself is a violation of the separation of powers because the governor came up with this whole scheme on his own without the involvement of the legislature, who are there to represent the people.
Well, it was initially, it was like a 2 weeks, right? Flattening the curve that actually ended up being right now 8 months.
Right. Exactly.
Kevin, I have a lot of friends of mine have businesses and own businesses, and everybody's asking me, knowing that everybody's watching, by the way, and knowing that we're going to meet tonight, they say, what are our rights? Like now with all those business, they're barely hanging in, they can't feed their families and bricks of bankruptcies. What are our rights as a business owners in terms of when we're being forced and fined to keep our business closed? Do we have any rights? Can we do anything? Can we fight back anyhow? And
how? How can we do that besides the recall Newsom that it's been going on and on?
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I think that, the lawsuits that are ongoing by businesses have, some are still in the process, some have not succeeded, but the one that has just gotten filed that I just mentioned, that challenges the whole lockdown scheme based upon our precedent of separation of powers, I think that that is something that, is very promising. And, at the same time, you should talk to your legislator and say, why aren't you stepping up and actually trying to rein the governor in? And why aren't you coming up with a, something better than what he had that's actually based upon science and that doesn't punish business owners for no reason at all?
Kevin, that's a great idea, because that's exactly what I was thinking of doing, just contact our legislators. And I myself, I had a business that had been, successfully open and obviously sort of under the table, but was there's no cases. I have my own data of being successful, and nobody got sick, and everybody's happy, and keep operating with success. And I know a lot of people that have done that, owning their own business and operating, obviously, sort of illegally, but nobody got sick. They're all doing fine. There's no cases. So.
But, Kevin, at the end of the day, it's like, of course, we are going to go and talk to our legislatures. I think that it's one for all and all for one, kind of like the Musketeers rule. Even if it's going to be only one person, nobody's really going to pay attention. The moment we are always going to get together and help you out and support you in any way we can, I think that we might have a chance. And, you already won the first battle. I mean, the war, it's not ending, it's just the first battle. So from this moment on, how can we really involve ourselves besides writing, to the ones in charge, of our districts? We know that COVID, okay, it's going to stay. And again, I'm not diminishing its importance, but definitely I'm trying to figure out exactly how small businesses are going to make it, considering now that it's the flu season and we are going to have more cases. I mean, we're talking about an increased numbers. Again, there are going to be new lockdowns. Orange County immediately went to, I think, tier 1 again. They're thinking of closing down the gyms. I mean, what exactly is going on here? Are we going in reverse? And how can we stop this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question. And, we've mentioned a couple of things that we're working on with the litigation. I think that another effort that I'm involved in that I see spreading around the state is myself and James Gallagher and a couple other legislators have convened a group of 15 counties in our region in Northern California to come together to challenge the governor on what he's been doing and to challenge this lockdown system that doesn't make any sense for our region and some of these other terrible policies like school closures, and to try to get some consensus among local governments that are closer to the people as to the best way forward. And I've heard of a similar effort in Southern California being spearheaded by Riverside County. So I think that, whatever vehicles are available for people to come together and express their voice in unison and present alternatives, I think that that sort of thing can be effective.
How many lawsuits do we have right now going against our friend, Governor Newsom?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I've lost track. I think, as of a few months ago, it was up to 30. So it's probably,
okay.
now. I think ours is the only one that's been successful.
Yes.
So far. But I think, and we specifically challenged in order that we thought presented a very clear case so that we could get to a trial really quickly. And we used this argument based upon the separation of powers, which we thought was the most compelling argument that a court would be willing to accept. So I think that, the fact that we got a favorable decision in a relatively short time period
Sure.
Vindicates that decision. And now hopefully it can be used to bring about, the sort of changes that our state needs.
Great. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people are listening right now and just have their hopes up, thinking that they might hear good news. So if it was, for our listeners that our job is to give them hope. Would you give us some hope? Is any good news that you want to share with us? Like, it's almost Christmas. That would be our Christmas gift to them. Something like, guys, it's going to be something positive. We need, because God forbid, we heard a lot of negativity with all the elections. So is anything positive that's happening right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there is. And, you know, aside from the fact that the governor has been rebuked in a court of law and has been restrained by...
I wonder what if he's actually gonna obey the law. I mean, clearly he didn't before. Why would he do anything different now just because some judge ordered him anything?
Well,
I mean, I don't...
Because now he's under a restraining order. So once it goes into effect, that's binding like it would be on any person.
Right.
If he violates it, we could take him to court and then he'd be, you know, in contempt of court if he refused to obey. So, you know, that's a positive. I think that, you know, there are actually some good results in California with the elections in the state assembly. Republicans picked up 1 seat, and we've lost seats every election for quite a while. And then the voters rejected 4 different acts of the legislature, if you can believe that. 4 different proposals or laws from the legislature were defeated by voters, including AB 5, the ban on independent contracting. Which
that was great.
We're out of here, and the voters said no. We're going to reject that corrupt law. This bail reform, quote unquote, bill that abolished caste bail. The voters said no. Getting rid of or bringing back affirmative action. The voters said no. Allowing 17-year-olds to vote. The voters said no. So these are all
that's some good.
Directly said this should be the law, and the voters had other ideas. And on top of all that, Proposition 15, which would have been it was this attack on Prop 13, massively funded by the special interests that have ruined California, these big massive union conglomerates, that too was defeated, even though Gavin Newsom endorsed it, campaigned for it. So I think that the people of California are starting to understand what has been happening to our state and who's to blame for it. It's the politicians in Sacramento, and there's a real movement for change that's starting to coalesce.
Great. So
whatever
the Governor Newsom had already put in place, those regulations, the mandates. So you say that there's nothing we can do about it, just kind of have to wait for, obviously, for the lawsuit and the judge to, is anything to rule on them. So whatever, like businesses with closures and all that, as the cases are
about being reversed, right?
The reverse, yeah. Is anything, is any hope on that anytime soon? I mean, how long usually takes for a court to rule on these things?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think, you know, the governor is not going to, agree that the order as it now exists will stop him from, enforcing the lockdown. But I think that, it's a very good precedent, and this other litigation that is now in the works, could potentially lead to a good outcome before too long. It's hard to say exactly how quickly things will move, though.
Yeah.
Kevin, in regards to Prop 15, I always love the fact that all these props are going to be presented as very helpful for the educational system, which was, like you said, the repeal of Prop 13. And in this particular case, Prop 15 was coded in such a way that would appeal to the educational system. How much percentage of, if that would have passed, how much money actually schools would have gotten? Because I think that very many times people don't really realize that whenever we're going to pass a prop, and it's going, taxes are going to go up supposedly for education, not so much from that it's really going to go to education. And I know that you also have an educational background.
Right. Well, I mean, it would have raised taxes by billions and billions of dollars. And in theory, a lot of that would have gone to the education system. But how much of it actually ends up getting to school sites and benefiting students is a different matter. I mean, we've already increased education spending over $30 billion a year in less than a decade. And there's no evidence that that's had any positive impact on students.
There's no signs of that, in schools, actually, on school.
Yeah, so a lot of the money just goes to, helping special interest groups, or gets gobbled up at the level of district bureaucracies, especially with LAUSD, which is this behemoth in LA. So when if we really were wanting to benefit education, then do a proposition like that and make it so that families are given the money and they can then spend it how they choose on the education that they want for their kids. that would be, an
I
honest.
think that'd be much wiser. The family would spend their money much better than
Yeah, if that's what
schools. Yeah.
point is to really benefit kids, then okay, let's put the money in their hands and let them make the decision that's best for them. But of course, that's not what was proposed.
Yeah, I've really struggled with one thing, which is I'm coming from, I grew up in communist Romania.
So did I.
We both actually, yeah. So hello, I know. So I lived under communism and socialism and all that. But one thing is striking to me. I mean, we are asked to not work. We are fine if we get caught working. But at the same time, the government is trying to raise our taxes. And how does that even make any sense for someone to put something like that in a ballot when in the same time say, don't work? How do they expect us to pay for all those increases of taxes and prices and everything? Why? Who are making those laws? I'm just a little bit flabbergasted. Who makes those laws that it makes complete no sense to a regular guy like me?
Well, you're right. It makes no sense at all. And especially when we have an unemployment department, the EDD, that has been so incompetent that people have waited for months or longer just to get their unemployment benefits. So it's like the government tells you can't work, then won't get you your benefits that you've paid into the system for, and then tries to raise your taxes. I mean, welcome to the state of California.
Yeah. Talking about making California great again, let's look at all the businesses that are actually leaving California because of all these things, because of the lockdowns, because of the increase in taxes. I mean, California, it's not the California dream anymore. It probably for very many of us has become the California nightmare. So when it's coming down to businesses, I mean, Kevin, how can we find any or give any incentives, to the businesses that are actually really either on the verge of leaving or maybe, they have left, and probably to find some sort of an incentive, to call them back?
Well, I mean, we just need to stop, going
nonsense, yeah,
pushing them and making life miserable for them and regulating them and viewing them as, just as a revenue source for the state. I mean, businesses want to be here. We have many advantages as a state. We have an amazing population. We have 40 million people. We have an amazing climate and, incredible industries here. Businesses want to be here. It's the government that is chasing them away. So just do no harm. Stop being, creating harmful policies. I mean, we can talk about incentives if you want, but the best incentive will just be to stop creating new disincentives.
It is. I started my business about 15 years ago. I can tell you the business climate has changed tremendously since back then. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's business friendly anymore. But Kevin, another question. I know that businesses, we are being told stay home, don't work. And honestly, we can't do that. I mean, we have families, we have bills to pay. I mean, we cannot stay home. And most friends of mine who own businesses are operating, whether with the risk of getting caught, with the risk of whatever risks are there. People like this, they will quote unquote break the lockdown and the curfews and all the mandates. What would you say to people like that, coming from the Sacramento with these people, with your background and your friends, obviously the people that and people are not going to comply. Simply, they're not going to comply, and they will create all that conflict between the state legislation, the health officials, the official period, and the business owners. What is the solution here? Because they were not going to stop. It's like prohibition. People are not going to drink just because you make it illegal. The same thing. People are not going to stop working just because make working illegal, because people have to pay their bills. What's the answer? I mean, I don't know.
Is that people should not be put in that position. I mean, the state should not be creating these arbitrary rules that force businesses to shut down, even though they've done everything the state asked. I mean, you have people who, have followed the rules to a T, who enforce the mask rules and who enforce social distancing and the whatever hours they're allowed to operate and everything else. They do everything they're told. There's no evidence that anything that they or even their whole industry is doing is contributing to increased transmission. And yet then with a drop of a dime, the state says, oh, sorry, shut everything down, send your employees home. I mean, it just makes no sense in any way.
But Kevin, those officials, what they think is that these people, small businesses specifically, when they really it's vital for them to operate. They really think that these people are going to comply, but they're not going to comply. In fact, they will actually go underground and operate, and then you lost track of anything, whether it's
That's going to be the black market that we are so familiar with, you know, coming from Eastern Europe.
yeah, and then you lost track of everything, whether it's the you know, income or
The revenue, the income, the
revenues,
taxation.
or the disease transmission, for that matter, whether it's one or not. And it's not going to happen. It's conflict, and it's just, I know I'm just venting. I mean, I'm just venting. I'm like, why is this happening? It's not America like. It's very strange. It's like those Newsom make those decisions. These dictatorship like. It's very frustrating for common men.
Sure.
Kevin, let's talk a little bit before we jump into the educational, you know, part. Let's talk a little bit about censorship. You know, it looks like very many times when there is a new data evidence, things have been censored by the media. The role of the media is pretty much, it has to be neutral. We would have to just look at the facts and report. We should not give our own opinions and take sides. That hasn't happened in a long time. And I think right now media is the one that is really spreading us or dividing us. What kind of, I would say, what kind of events have you had experiences with censorship?
With censorship, well, I mean, I think that probably my most direct experience is in the legislature itself. The leaders of our legislature do everything they can to try to, you know, silence dissent, and to, you know, have as little opportunity for the public to have their voice heard, and to keep, you know, those who go against the grain, you know, as limited in their in our ability to speak as possible. I mean, I had one example for when I spoke out against our state's failed education policies, and for doing so, the Speaker of the Assembly moved me to the smallest office in the Capitol as an attempt to intimidate me against speaking out against the prevailing regime, which of course didn't work. I've continued to fight for, you know, the sort of changes our state needs, but that's the way things, you know, work at our Capitol. Is there's this attempt to really just and it gets worse every year, that you just try to limit debate and discussion and the openness of the process as much as possible, so that, you know, the special interest groups who just work things out behind closed doors don't have to be bothered with you know, the inconvenience of letting the public in.
I mean, imagine if it happens to you. Imagine what happened to people like us, you know, regular people like you, trying to have a voice, trying to express ourselves and our concerns. It's like terrible, terrible. Go ahead, Aura.
But I do believe, you know, censorship has been, you know, probably I have seen censorship actually more and more becoming more predominantly vicious, you know, probably starting in 2016, but right now I would say even more since the pandemic started. You know, you cannot really be against the mainstream, the status quo for society. And I think that's where the problem is. And you know, the problem is media to begin with. You know, I think its role has changed so much that we take decisions on our own without being backed up by legislators. So media, all of a sudden, it's creating this dissent among, you know, population, among Democrats and Republicans. I think that we can find better ways to actually find a solution without, you know, the interference of media. Kevin, I just, you know, you said that you were actually moved in another office, right? Did you have a really nice view of the elevator, you know?
Yeah. I have a question for you, Kevin. The people like me and a lot of friends of mine that have small businesses, and you know, I'm not sure how much a lawsuit costs and what are the costs involved with that. What can we do in terms of, is any help out there, like legal help for people like they don't have the funds or resources to defend themselves? And I guess the last input here, do you have anything for us in terms of, obviously, get together, make our voices heard, but how? Other than calling the legislators, and is any step further that we can take this fight, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the more people that can sort of just, join together and speak out against what's going on, the better. I mean, I think that the more voices there are, the harder it is for those in power to ignore. So, and I think that there's a lot of avenues for doing that, whether it be organizing, whether it be lawsuits, whether it be, contacting your representative, whether it be putting things in the newspaper or on the radio or on social media. So I just encourage people to be engaged. I mean, and
To speak up, basically.
out and help get the word out.
Yeah.
Speak up, guys. Get a word out.
Well, welcome, Dr. CHERNISS, and welcome, RAPHI REBUCAS. We are, literally going to start the second part, which pretty much our focus is going to be education. And Kevin
said, I'm out of here. I'm out of here, guys. Look at, it came back. Good. We're not that terrible. Good.
So Kevin was here, with us for the economical shutdown for COVID. And right now, let's focus on education. We are so interested in what's going to happen with the reopening of the schools. So Kevin, I'm going to actually start the second part of the podcast with you. Actually, a couple of things about Kevin. You are the son of a special education teacher, Kevin, as far as I remember, right? And you began your career as a high school teacher in South Central LA, where you chaired the English department. And then you led your students to have significant gains. You also started an award-winning speech and debate team, correct? Am I right, Kevin?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And well so done, for that reason, I think that you are so closer to us, much closer than others, because you have a background in education. And for that, actually, we invited, and thank you so much for joining us, Dr. CHERNISS. Dr. CHERNISS has been since 2018 the superintendent of Palos Verdes Peninsula Unified School District. And a little bit about Dr. CHERNISS' background. He rose really through the ranks in the Beverly Hills Unified School District, from middle school math teacher to K-12 principal, and then to human resources director, and then later on assistant superintendent of business services. He graduated from UC Santa Barbara, earning later on his doctoral in education degree from USC Rassier School of Education. And he is also very concerned, in regards to the reopening of the schools. And of course, how are we going to bring back the loss of curriculum? And at the same time, I also have RAPHI REBUCAS. RAPHI is a prodigy, I would say. He is a 15 years old student going to West High. He was born in Torrance, and he proudly represents more than 2 million American students as the president of the Young Leaders PAC Board of Governors. So welcome to Raw and Real.
Welcome to Raw and Real, guys. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having us.
What kind of questions do you have for Kevin?
I don't know. Kevin, I don't know if you know where I'm coming from here. I've been one of the proponents of reopening our schools, one of the few proponents of reopening the schools in Southern California, especially among school administrators. So back in March, I tried to get a coalition of superintendents to lobby the governor to have more reasonable reopening guidelines. So we sent a letter to Newsom, didn't get anything back. I sent a letter to the president. We've had, several communications with the county, with the board of supervisors. And from the start, we've consistently said that, reopening schools can be done safely. And, the provisions and the metrics that they're using are very restrictive and non-realistic. So our goal right now is to allow schools that want to open, allow them to open. In my community, I have 85% of my families that want to come back to school in a hybrid model. And so we're trying to serve them. We have great programs, and there's a lot of people fighting and advocating for families that don't want to come back. And everybody that doesn't want to come back is in remote learning. But who is advocating for the families that do want to come back? Because so I guess my question or comment to you or request is that, there are a few administrators out there, but there's not enough public officials willing to speak up and fight for this.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for what you're doing. And I know that it takes courage, since there's so much political pressure and that you're running up against. And since, the unions have treated this as their Super Bowl and are, doing everything in their power to keep schools closed. And we've seen new reasons invented all the time to keep schools closed. And so that's great to hear that you're fighting in Southern California. And, it's now that several more counties have been moved back to this purple tier today, that's going to delay school reopenings even longer. There's no evidence that school reopenings even contribute to increased transmission of the coronavirus. The governor's own Health and Human Services Secretary, Dr. Galley, has said that. In Massachusetts, the Secretary of Education has said even high-risk communities should keep their schools open because there's no evidence that it's contributing to spread of the virus. And of course, we know that the evidence as to the harms of keeping schools closed is overwhelming and devastating and tragic in a whole variety of ways. So I think that there's, no greater example of our government's just abject mishandling of this whole situation than what's going on in schools. And I'm going to be, legislators finally getting back into session next month. First thing I'm going to do is introduce legislation to make sure that every family has an in-person option right away. Because, I mean, as you said, that's what families want. 85% of the families in your district, and no one should be forced to while this is still an ongoing situation if they're uncomfortable with it. But right now, we're forcing everyone to stay home when they don't want to. So I think it should be in the families.
Unfortunately, in LA County, it's become political. And one of the things that LA County decided, among many restrictive, for example, waivers are allowed statewide K6. LA County said it's only K2. And then LA County also came out and said that we're only going to accept 30 a week, whereas every other county was able to open, right away. The regulations, the metrics, I would ask Kevin if you can talk to them about changing their metrics and relaxing these restrictions. So they made this up. They said, we're going to pick 4 colors: purple, red, yellow, violet, or whatever it is. And now we're in LA County in the purple and everybody else is in the purple. Well, you guys just made up these categories. And now you have these metrics that are so restrictive within each category. You got to, before you move a category, you got to wait 2 weeks, and then you got to wait another 2 weeks. The metrics are very restrictive. And in LA County, if you are in school, if you have a COVID symptom in school, this is their regulations. If you have a COVID, so Johnny comes to school with a sore throat, has to go home. The entire class has to go home and wait for Johnny to get either a negative COVID test or positive. The whole class stays home for 14 days. So, I kind of understand the quarantine piece on COVID positive, but these regulations, every district's gonna be quarantining symptomatic kids. And how many kids come to school? The symptoms are listed as cough, body ache, sore
fatigue,
throat.
everything.
That's me every day. I mean, without the cough, but body aches, my class would be shut down for weeks.
Wow, that's crazy. I was unaware of those policies.
Yeah, so I would ask that you or at least have your staff look at the policies when we are able to open, because they're so ridiculous that what's going to happen is we're going to fight for our schools to be able to come back, and then we're under these regulations on symptomatic kids, on these quarantine regulations on before you even get COVID, that are just insane.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is they keep coming up with new things like, oh, we need to change the air filtration system. Well, that'll take a couple months, we had a hearing, the one hearing we've had on the topic, or actually wasn't even really on this topic, but I brought it up, where the state superintendent, Tony Thurman, was there. And I've never heard someone more excited in my life about the prospect of keeping schools closed. He's like, we're finding new information. COVID could be with us for years. Oh, we know about, and it's like, just grasping at anything. To have a policy of keeping schools closed.
Well, here's the elephant in the room. For school officials, it's easier to remain closed. It's an easier job. It's easier to manage school when no one's there.
Sure.
And that goes for universities. That's the Cal States, which shut down in May. They announced they wouldn't be back till January. It's easier and cheaper to run school remotely. And people don't want to step up, and it's hard. It's hard to bring kids back, but it's also, really beneficial.
Yeah. Rafi, from a student's perspective, you are right now going to West High, you are in the 10th grade, besides running the, Young Leaders Pact. What's your perception? I mean, dealing with COVID, and what do you think we should do? How can we help students like you and their families to actually come back, in a regular classroom?
All right, well, I appreciate that question, Aura, and thank you, Leo and Aura, for having us today. I really appreciate that. Look, students have to come back to school. That is a fact. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. So many people, so many peers of mine, even myself, I would argue, were drawing so much further from our social relationships. And my main concern with school closures is not the lack of learning, because I think that, we are able to have a somewhat of an education online. It's mental health. I think that's my main concern. Did you know that on average, if we average out all the surveys of students in the past few months, 70% of students right here in the state of California are suffering from some sort of mental health decline. This is exceptionally important to me, not just because I'm a student, but because I represent millions, 2 million students in the Young Leaders Political Action Committee Board of Governors. And they're suffering from, a variety of things. It can be anxiety, it can be depression, it can be loneliness, it can be a lot of things. And if we look at the science, even scientific studies prior to COVID, you'd find out that depending on the severity of the illness itself, mental health decline can lead substantially. Over 2/3 of severe mental health decline leads to substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and in tragic cases, it leads to suicides. So when we see this, and I've, for being so open about wanting to reopen schools, I've taken a lot of slack, I have to say, from so many people on the other side of the aisle, on the board, some of my liberal leaning peers who say, Rafi, do you have a lack of regard for human life to say that you want to open up schools? And I would like to reverse the question and try to ask the other side the same question. Do you have a lack of respect for human life when you see people in our own communities who are dying, and they're dying unnaturally because of school closures? They're dying because they're not able to see their friends. They're dying because they are abusing alcohol and drugs, because they don't see any sort of normalcy coming back into place. And so when I see people like Assemblymember Kiley and Dr. Superintendent CHERNISS here, I have some hope for the future of students, because it's good to see that we have leaders in place who are defending us as opposed to defending the establishment. Now, let me be clear before I sort of yield my time. One life lost from COVID is too many. We do not want to see increased deaths, increased cases. That is a bad thing. And it's a caricature from the other side to insist that conservatives, or even people who support, anybody who supports the reopening of schools, is being irresponsible. But I'll tell you this, I think that we're not paying close attention to the very idea that people are losing their lives from alcohol and substance abuse and suicides, increased suicide rates in our state, most especially, and in states like Michigan and New York, because of the lack of responsibility we're having in just letting the schools close for forever. Some of them want to close our schools for forever, basically. And it's incredibly detrimental to our future. It's incredibly detrimental to our students.
Thank you, Rafi.
But I got a question, just one question. It seems like there's more support. First of all, we don't know how many people actually want to go back to. It's not like a poll, like I said. This is the percentage of people that want to go back to school, and it seems like there's more support. I'm a parent myself, and I can't wait for the schools to be open again. but it seems that there's more support for, even though the percentages, perhaps, I'm not sure exactly, don't quote me on it, but this percentage is lower for the ones who stay at home at this point in time. What can we do to give a voice to the ones like Dr. CHERNISS said, to the ones who want to go back to school? What can we do about that?
Well, unfortunately, our society has made this a political issue. And so it's amazing how aligned or an association around conservative values and views to want to return versus not. And it should never have been like that. And it never should, but I believe it is. So you'll have more conservative communities that are more supportive of returning, and more liberal communities that are less, which is one of the challenges. I will say this: we have a ton of teachers that want to come back. This is not a teacher wants to stay home, and they want to get back too. So there's a lot of people. Parents want to get back. Teachers want to get back. Parents need to go to work.
How can we make that happen? These people, give them more of a bigger voice or a louder voice.
Well, I will say one thing, which I've learned, is you're an easy target. And Kevin, you've probably seen that too. When you're outspoken about something that isn't the prevalent, thinking, some people don't want to put themselves out.
Kevin, tell us a little bit. I mean, I do remember, Torrance Unified School District, as well as, Palos Verdes. We all had, a survey that was passed around, and, the survey was about, do you really want to come back to school? And Kevin, we did have a voice as teachers, as parents, as students, Palos Verdes, Torrance, all the South Bay, they had this survey where pretty much like 75% of parents, they wanted their kids back to school. 90% of the teachers' body, they wanted to go back to school. And then Newsom came, and actually he's been overriding the local decisions. And that's pretty much one of the problems. And the second problem is the fact that school has been politicized. Education should not have political colors, but it just looks like it's happening like that. What can we do, Kevin, to actually support you with the process of school reopening?
Well, I mean, the problem if you're in LA is that I think, LA is in the purple tier right now, right? So the entire county is forbidden from opening schools in any way. So that requires a change by the state, and the governor has been unwilling to do that. So I believe it falls to the legislature to fight back. And so that's why I'm introducing legislation to make it so every school, every child in the state has an in-person learning option. So we don't have any purple tier where our entire county has all of its schools shut down for no reason at all. So I will be introducing that legislation in just a couple of weeks when the legislature comes back. And I'd encourage you to be in touch with your legislator and say, you are doing enormous harm if you don't support this. If you continue to support the governor's unscientific and monstrous school closure policy in the face of all evidence about what's best for kids, you're doing incalculable harm to millions of kids throughout the state of California.
We would love to sign on to that.
All right, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, the more voices we have and they're going to be heard, again, I'm coming back to the Musketeers rules, one for all and all for one. I think that, with one flower spring, it's not going to come. But if we're going to have a bouquet, then probably things are going to start, happening. RAPHI, any suggestions?
Well, look, I think that right now we are sending a message to those who oppose school closures. When you have a sitting California State Assembly member, a superintendent, and a president of a youth political action committee coming together and say, look, we need to reopen schools, I think we need to send that important message to our leaders all across our state, and quite frankly, all across our nation. This is exceptionally personal to a lot of my peers. It's exceptionally personal to me. I like what the assembly member said. You are doing enormous harm if you choose to continue to promote this whole idea of children who are losing their lives unnaturally, right? Viruses and illnesses, they come and go. These are natural deaths. What's not natural is substance abuse. What's preventable is alcohol abuse and suicides. And that can be prevented in the governor's office by a simple stroke of a pen. It can be prevented, these deaths can be prevented by a simple aye or nay vote in the legislature. And so, when we come together and use the leadership positions we have, whether it be superintendent of a school district, whether it be a member of our legislature, whether it be, a nonprofit director, we need to do, I think, in my opinion, we need to do everything in our power to make sure that the students and teachers and parents who are aware of the harm that comes with closing schools down and having no end in sight, at first it's a safety precaution, but then, as it progresses, it seems as though, we're trying to enable this. We're trying to enable these circumstances, and that should not be the case. I hope it's not the case for people. I hope people aren't advertently and deliberately trying to keep people in captivity, so to speak, locked up in their homes and, fear for this virus. Again, one life is too much. Lost to COVID-19, but at the same time, we need to outweigh the pros and cons, and we need to be respectful of human life. And I think that starts with reopening schools.
Awesome.
And I also think that there's like Dr. Chernoff says greatly. I said that there's will be a consequence of speaking up, obviously against the mainstream. But I think the consequence of staying quiet are far greater than, and the results are far damaging than keeping quiet than speaking up. So let's all speak up, guys. Let's grow something.
Make some noise.
Yeah.
Make
yeah.
some noise.
Make some noise. We have a voice. We got to use it.
Yeah. So Kevin, would it be okay if I'm going to share your contact information with Dr. CHERNISS? I really believe that you've been such an amazing road opener for all of us, and I think, the more the merrier. We should all stick together and really achieve what the ultimate goal is. We, of course, reopen schools as safely as possible before it is too late, before too much curriculum is going to be lost. And we really need to use the brains of our new generation, so we are going to have actually a successful and abundant country we all want to live in, and of course a very abundant state, which is California, right? So if there are any more ideas or suggestions, Dr. CHERNISS.
I'm happy to team up with whoever wants to advocate for kids.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
What a great content, and I want to thank you all for joining us. It was an amazing program. A lot of people can learn from what we talked tonight.
Thank you so much, Dr. CHERNISS. Thank you, Rafi. Thank you, Kevin. For really being the advocate and the fighter for all of us. And thank you so much for spending so much time with us on Raw and Real, and for everybody else who has been watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Raw and Real with Aura and Leo. Have a great night, you guys. Thank you so much.
Guys, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.